Unless you're making your cosplay very last minute before a convention, most cosplays take weeks to months to make, especially if you're sewing them from scratch. Personally, I've made many cosplays in my time and they all take me far too long to make, so today I thought it'd be fun to make a cosplay in just 12 hours. For this challenge, I decided to do an Angel from Lilo and Stitch cosplay because I'd already planned out this cosplay beforehand and bought all the fabric in preparation to do it in a normal way, but I felt like the design that I created could definitely be achievable in 12 hours, so it seemed like the best option for me to go forward with. I also decided that I would do this cosplay over 2 days, so 6 hours in 2 different days, because on the week that I filmed this, I didn't have 2 days off in a row and I didn't want to exhaust myself by doing a 12-hour day between work days. So this just worked out a lot better for my schedule while still allowing me to only take 12 hours to make the entire thing. Design-wise, I really wanted to do a Lolita-inspired look, with a big layered skirt, a blouse with princess-inspired sleeves, and a little bonnet to attach the ears and the antenna to. The hat specifically was very strategically designed so that I wouldn't have to style any wigs for this cosplay, which worked out super well for this challenge because I take forever to make anything with wigs. Like, even cutting them takes me far too long to do, so I definitely wouldn't have been able to style a wig in this 12-hour period. So I'm very glad that I could use a previous wig and not have to worry about any of the styling of it. Plan-wise, I split the outfit up into 4 different parts, and then I divided them across the 2 days, with each day having a shorter and longer part to complete. And with all that said, I can finally get on to the making part. Day 1 started would be cutting out all the strips I would need for my overskirt. For this, I used a crushed velvet in a purple leaning pink colour. Angel is sometimes drawn very pastel pink and sometimes she's quite purple in tone, so I went with a colour that I felt looked better on me and also has slightly more contrast with the light pink that I chose for the stomach area, which just so happened to be more of a purple toned option. In terms of a pattern / plan for this, I cut out a piece of paper that was half my waist measurements by 15 centimeters and used this pattern piece for the entire skirt using this guide that I'll put up on screen. I tried to work out how to explain this process, but I couldn't word it in a way that made sense. Luckily for me, I found a video by the creator So Black where she expertly explained this process really well. I will put her tutorial down below in the description if you'd want to make a skirt like this. They really seem to understand the maths of how to make these skirts work, so they are definitely a better resource than me. Sewing wise for this skirt, I needed each lower level to be gathered to the size of the level above it. So because of this, I obviously started on the longest piece, which is the bottom piece. The first layer was so long. I don't think I've ever sewn anything that included this long of a strip of fabric before, so it was a lot of fun to sew something different than normal. It was also my first time gathering using my machine. I used to do it all by hand, but I knew it would take hours to do with a piece this long, so I opted to do it via machine. And I have to say, it was so much easier than I expected it to be. And if you've seen some of my more recent videos, you'll see that I gather a lot of things nowadays and I do it all by machine because of this project. The reason I'd never gathered with a machine before this point was because I really couldn't wrap my head around one piece of thread being strong enough to do it. It just seemed really unrealistic, but surprise surprise, it was obviously fine. I do think you'd need to sew 2 lines of gathering stitches if the fabric was thicker than this, especially at this long of a length, which is exactly what the person did in the tutorial that I said earlier. But I was using crushed velvet, which is a very lightweight fabric and it's also very slippery, so it gathers extremely easily. Whereas other fabrics, for example the mesh that I use for the underskirt, are very much tougher, meaning that the thread couldn't withstand being pulled through this long of a distance. Basically what I'm trying to say is that I accidentally picked the exact right fabric for this project. The only reason I actually picked this fabric is because velvet gives me kind of fur vibes without having any actual fur on it, which is really hard to work with. But it really came in clutch for this part of the project because it made it super easy sailing. Next step for this part of the project was adding on the waistband for the skirt. For this I used a piece with the same height as the other layers, but I ended up folding it in half as I wanted it to have the crush on the inside and the outside, even if it rolls over. So this was the best way to do this. The only thing I forgot to do at this stage was hem the bottom of the skirt. I had it written down on my list, but I skipped over it accidentally, and I am so glad that I did, because I did run into some challenges later on in the project that I probably wouldn't have time to fix if I had hemmed it here. So in hindsight, something that really annoyed me when I realized it the second day was actually a blessing in disguise. The last thing I did for the skirt that day was very badly sew in a zipper. I did this by sewing the back seam together and then sewed the zip face down into the seam, and then for some reason I decided there was too much fabric covering the zip, so I completely cut out the zipper section and sewed it over the top again. It will be in the back, so it's okay for a 12-hour project, but I really want to sew a cover for it at some point that just attaches over the top with buttons, because it's not really a wear outside the house ready looking project like this. I also, when sewing in the zip, ended up making the waistband even shorter because I put the zip too low on the body. So you'll notice in the other clips that the waistband is a little bit narrow narrower, but that's just because I messed up completely on this zip section. With the skirt all finished, I then moved up to the top of the head to make the bonnet, which is by far the best part of this cosplay. I feel like if it wasn't there, the cosplay wouldn't work because it would just look like a very velvety outfit, but nothing more than that. So I'm really glad I included the ears and the antennae on this cosplay. For this, I started out by googling a pattern for a bonnet and very quickly sketched out the vague shape that I found on brown paper. It wasn't quite right at first, so I did end up cutting part of the pieces away to get a better shape, but before doing this, I cut out 2 identical pieces from the velvet and sewed them together so I could try it on. These 2 pieces ended up being the lining layer, with another 2 pieces of the correct shape backlined onto them to create the outer layer of the bonnet. And this came out so cute, I kind of want to make ones in different colours so I could actually wear them in my everyday life. Although if I did that, I would probably edit the pattern again to cover my ears, because if I'm going to wear a hat, I want it to be slightly more practical, and my ears get very cold, so it would be very good to have something over my ears. Not that I need that right now because it is 30 degrees today, so definitely not the right weather for a bonnet. Anyways, with the base done, I then went on to making the ears and the antenna. For her ears, I started out by cutting rabbit-shaped ears out of wadding, which I'm going to use to create stability. I also used this initial piece out of the pattern piece to cut out the second ear and the velvet covering for it. To sew the front and back piece of the ears together, I backed the velvet with the satin, which is the second main fabric for this project, and sewed directly along the pattern lines. I decided this would be best for this piece as I didn't want the fabric to sag, and I really wasn't sure how well the fabrics would sew together, so I gave myself a big enough margin that I could sew without any issues. And it worked out okay. The pieces are a little bit too big for the inner ears, and you can tell they were done quite quickly, but I do feel like they give off the correct vibes for the character and make the bonnet really obviously a cosplay piece rather than a fashion piece. For the antennae, I went with the simplest route possible, which was making long tubes and then just stuffing them. This was a little fiddly because I'm really bad at turning fabric, but overall super easy to do, especially as I have a proper turner now, which really helps turn tubes without hurting my hands too much. I also made sure to roll these antennae a lot in my hands just to give them a better shape and to prevent any lumps. With all my pieces now made, I put the bonnet onto my wig head and sewed them all into place. I did this by hand, so it took quite a while to secure them properly, while also making sure that both sides were the same, but I think it all came out better than I imagined it would, and it really goes well with the wig in the final look. I did at this point forget to add the ties to actually put it on my head with, so you will see me make them later on. Because I had a little bit of time left over on this first day, I then went on to cutting out my pieces for day 2. For the underskirt, it was the exact same process as the outer skirt, but with only 3 levels instead of 4, and the final level being 3 times bigger than that of the overskirt. This is because I wanted as much fabric as possible down there to give it the shape that I wanted. To make the shirt, I started out by tracing a shirt I already had to make a pattern piece, and I used the full piece to cut out the back panels, and then I adjusted the pattern piece for the front panels as I knew I wanted the centerpiece to be the pink satin instead of the velvet. Sleeve wise, at this point I only cut out the upper section for them, not the exciting extravagant part of it, because unfortunately I ran out of time to get anything else done. So after the first day, I had the overskirt fully done and looking pretty much exactly how I wanted it to, other than the zipper that I could not finish. The bonnet is technically done, it's just not quite wearable yet because it doesn't have those straps on the bottom. And I'd also cut out all the pieces for my underskirt and half of the pieces I needed for the top. So overall, I finished everything I wanted it to and got a head start on the second day, which really put me in a good position going into the next 6 hours because I really fell behind in a lot of places here. Day 2, I started out by making the underskirt, and I won't go into too much detail about this because it's pretty much the exact same process as the overskirt. It's just got a bit more fabric like I said earlier. I'm not fully happy with how this turned out in the end. It definitely needs to be longer and have more volume to it, especially if I want to be able to use it in different cosplay skirts that might be heavier and crush it down more. So I do think I'll be grabbing more mesh and adding a second layer to it in the future. This was also a lot harder than the overskirt because it was really difficult to gather everything. I had to do it in very short strips, gather that section and do another strip and then gather that section. I couldn't do it all in one piece because of the type of fabric that I was using. So I'm very glad I did this on the second day rather than the first day, because I feel like if I'd done this first thing, I would have got really annoyed at the project and might not have finished it, because it would have made me feel like I couldn't gather using a machine, and then I would have just not been able to gather anything. I would have had to do it all by hand, and I would not have got it done in the 12 hours, that is for sure. With over half my time gone for the day, I then moved up to the shirt, which was a lot more work than I thought it would be, but it was super fun to do. I started out super simple by just sewing together the base shirt that I was going to add the extra elements onto. This is something that I'm very used to sewing, so it took no time satisfying whatsoever and came out exactly how I expected it to. Next, I went on to adding the big flowing pieces for the princess sleeves, which definitely elevate this cosplay from very plain and ordinary to very extravagant and whimsical. I first made the cuffs. These consist of 2 squares of fabric sewn together in a circle and then folded over on itself so that I have a cuff that is velvet on both sides. As you can tell, these were very simple to make. You just have to make sure they're big enough to get your hand through while looking small enough so that they don't look really baggy on your wrists. Next, I went on to the princess sleeves. These started out as 2 big rectangles that I gathered along both shorter edges, one side to fit into the wrist cuffs and one side to fit onto the base of the shirt. This results in the bottom being more tightly gathered than the top, which gives it a more cone-like appearance, which really goes with how Angel's arms are drawn. These were quite fiddly to attach as I was working with tight circles rather than flat planes. So realistically, I should have sewn these onto the shirt before sewing the shirt together. But the thing about sewing fast is that it doesn't give you enough time to think ahead and pick an easier path to do. You just have to go down the first path that you see. In this case, this path meant that I took way longer on the sleeves than I should have. But realistically, I did have the time at this point, so I'm not too mad about putting a little bit of extra time into them. Now onto the section that went really slowly, which was the collar. I'm not good at collars. They never seem to work out in the way that I want them to. Like with this one, they were just far too short, so it doesn't go all the way around to the back. And I also made them far too narrow, so in the end, they don't really cover up the necktie that I made. I do think I'm gonna have to tack down the points at the front so that they don't move, but I can still get the tie through it. But that's something that I didn't do within the 12 hours because I wasn't trying anything on, so I didn't know I had this issue until I'd already stopped the clock. Finally, for the top, I added a clasp onto the back so I could close it and make the neck nice and tight. And then I did a really rough rolled hem at the bottom to make it the height that I wanted it to. Next, I went onto the tie, which caused so many issues. My sewing machine just didn't like me for this section. I don't know what I'd done to it. It just kept eating the fabric in all sorts of sections, even if it was absolutely fine 3 seconds before. And it was even more annoying because in theory, this part of the project is really easy. It's just a long tapered tube, very similar to the antennae that I just had to iron flat. So it should have been a very quick 2 or 3 minute project, but it turned into more like a 12 to 15 minute project. And I do feel like this is the reason that I couldn't finish the skirt properly. I really wanted to put that zipper cover on it, but because of this, I just didn't have time. Finally, for this project, I then went back up to the bonnet and added those little ties so I could actually attach it to my head later on. After making these pieces, I only had 6 minutes left on my timer, and realistically, I could have sewn something extra, but with my machine playing up so much, I didn't want to start something that I wasn't going to finish, so I decided just to call it. And yeah, without further ado, I can finally show you the final result for my 12-hour cosplay challenge. Overall, I am super happy with how this cosplay turned out. I feel like it's a really good cosplay for only taking me 12 hours. Probably better than some of the cosplays I spent much longer on, because it has those big sleeve elements and that big bonnet that really has a lot of impact. The only things I would change is that I would obviously make the collar bigger, like I said. And then with the ears, I realized that her ears are probably more upwards than I had them. I have them like out to the side. Hers are definitely more straight upwards. So I might at some point take them off the bonnet, cut them at a slightly different angle, and then sew them back on so they stand upwards a little bit more. And then obviously I want to fix the zipper on the back of the skirt and put a hem on it. But other than that, I feel like it's a pretty good cosplay for 12 hours. I did actually attempt this a few years ago. I think it was a 10-hour sewing challenge at that point, and I definitely didn't get anywhere near as done as I did for this project. So you can tell that I've got better at sewing over time, which makes me super happy to see. But with that said, that is it for this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a like down below, comment what else you'd like me to do, and subscribe as I post a new video every single week, and I'd love to see you again. But until then, bye!